JNCTV 시청자 여러분, 안녕하세요. 킴입니다. 남북 북미 정상회담이 세 차례나 열리면서 이렇게 더운 날씨엔 평양에 가서 시원한 냉면 한 그릇 먹을 날이 빨리 오기를 기다리는 분들이 많으실 텐데요. 오늘 인터뷰하는 분은 미주지역에서 한반도 종전을 위해 힘쓰고 계시는 한 시민단체의 사무총장님이십니다. 위민크로스 Dmz의 사무총장님인 크리스틴을 모시고 이 단체를 통해 어떤 일들을 하시는지 자세히 들어보려고 합니다. Hello, Christine. It's a pleasure to meet you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As you are the Secretary General of Cross DMZ, so can you briefly introduce what the Cross DMZ is for?
Yes, Cross DMZ was founded in 2015 to mobilize women for peace in Korea. And on the 70th anniversary of Korea's division by Cold War powers, we felt the need to bring to the world's attention the tragedy of the ongoing war and division of Korea. So we organized 30 women peacemakers from 16 countries, including Gloria Steinem, the most famous American feminist, and 2 Nobel Peace Laureates. And we organized a historic Women's Peace Walk. We walked with 10,000 Korean women on both sides of the DMZ. We walked on the streets of Pyongyang, we walked on the streets of Kaesong, and we crossed the DMZ from North to South Korea. And we walked with 3,000 women in South Korea. And in addition to the peace walks, we also held women's peace symposiums in both Pyongyang and also in Seoul, where we heard from Korean women about the impact of the unresolved war on their lives. And we also shared with the Korean women about the extraordinary work of ordinary women mobilizing for peace in their countries. And since then, we have continued to educate, to advocate, and to organize for a peace treaty to formally end the Korean War.
Is there any organization collaborate with the Cross DMZ so far?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's all we do is we collaborate. We realize we have to do this in coalition with many other organizations and other movements. So on the US side, we are the co-founders of the Korea Peace Network, along with AFSC and Peace Action. So these are US-based peace organizations all around the country. And so we have been mobilizing with them. We also have partnered with South Korean women's peace organizations. We had to do that for the Peace Walk. And we also partnered with North Korean organizations, the National Peace Committee, the Korea Socialist Women's Union, the Overseas Korean Committee. But really, our real partners are the women's peace organizations around the world, especially the Nobel Women's Initiative. They're based in Ottawa, Canada, as well as WILP, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. That's the oldest women's peace organization. 100 years ago in 1915, Jane Addams, who is a famous American peace worker, boarded a ship with other American women where they gathered at The Hague to try to stop World War I from happening. So these are the organizations who are our core partners, and that we're working together to put pressure on the UN or put pressure on other countries, but especially on the United States to try to negotiate a peace treaty with North Korea.
I see. Christine, last year, JNCTV reported the Cross DMZ won 2 million grants from Noble Foundation. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
What is the motivation to apply this grant? And can you explain us where this grant was used mostly?
Yes, so the Nova Foundation is, the source of the money comes from the Buffett family, and that's Warren Buffett and his sons, and the wife of one of the sons is Jennifer Buffett. She's a powerful feminist. She really believes in women's organizing. And so in the aftermath of the Trump election, she felt, as did many people, progressive people around the world, a sense of despair and a sense of urgency to try to bring forward some radical ideas. So she created something called the Radical Hope Fund, and there was a global competition. and Cross DMZ, we have obviously these long-standing partnerships with women's groups around the world. And we felt that this was an opportunity to actually formalize our partnerships by launching a global campaign. And so 1,300 groups from around the world applied, women's organizations, and we were one of 17 that were selected. And so it was Cross DMZ, the Nobel Women's Initiative, WILF, and the South Korean Women's Movement for Peace. And we decided to launch a global campaign called Korea Peace Now, Women Mobilizing to End the War. And we receive $1 million each year for 2 years. And the first year we've spent, and it's been divided among the organizations. And we have been hiring staff. Fortunately, with that money, we've been able to hire Hyun Lee, who is the U.S. national organizer for the Korea Peace Now campaign. We've been able to hire communications people. I mean, it's really been an extraordinary thing to see the capacity of our movement really, do this on a day-to-day basis. Korea Peace Movement has been largely voluntary. And as much as the sweat and love and dedication of Korean activists, there's nothing quite like having people who are dedicated to having strategy, to do this 24/7, to really see through an end to the Korean War. So having been an activist for over 15 years on this very issue, I see the impact that resources can actually make to move the conversation.
As we know, many South Korean media attacked it and labeled that woman Cross DMZ as a North Korean sympathizer or Jongbu in 2015. How did you feel about that issue at that time?
Well, as you can imagine, it was incredibly painful. Having dedicated most of my adult life to see peace on the Korean Peninsula was really painful. But in many ways, I mean, having been a student of the Korea Peace Movement, the Korea Peace and Reunification Movement, I mean, it's part of the process, because the red baiting, the kind of Cold War has never really ended on the Korean Peninsula. And so that is used, I think, we know for decades, especially in South Korea, for example, the national security law is still in effect. And anybody who challenged the US military occupation, anybody who challenged the division of Korea was labeled a communist. And that was used for generations to silence. And it wasn't just that they were silenced, but we know that they were tortured, they were imprisoned, they were killed. So I think that that trauma lives in the bodies of Koreans, it lives in the bodies of Korean Americans, and it's used to silence people that want to see peace. And so it was really painful to kind of go through that. But I think that we've come out on the positive end. We were courageous at a time when really Korea needed that. It was a very dark period for South Korea. Park Geun-hye was president. A lot of the peace and reunification activists had to go underground. And so I feel that it was a very difficult period, but thankfully Moon Jae-in is president now, thankfully for the Candlelight Revolution that really has made South Korean democracy so vibrant and a real beacon for the world. And we have to address the trauma. We have to make sure that we don't keep transferring the trauma, whether it's to future generations of Koreans. We have to transform the trauma. And I think that's why it's so important that women do this work, because we are the ones that, bring forward and nurture the next generation. And we also see the impact of the unresolved war on our families, on our communities, on our mental health and well-being. And so, it was a difficult period, but, that's part of doing this work. And it's part of saying enough is enough. I don't think Korean people want there to be any more war. And it's an opportunity now to really bring an end to this war.
I can tell it was a very hard time, and you got all the hard worship transformed to the good work. So I thank you, and I feel sorry about that too. By the way, we heard that a woman Cross DMZ contributed a lot to the passage of NDAA Amendment 217 in Congress. Can you explain the activities the woman Cross DMZ did for that historic moment?
Well, thankfully, because of the grant that we got from the No Foundation, we've been able to hire an extraordinarily talented and skillful and strategic woman in Washington, D.C. named Elizabeth Beavers. She really is one of the best and the brightest in terms of the anti-militarism and peace movement. And Elizabeth really understands how the Hill operates. And we knew that when the National Defense Authorization Act was coming up, that it was an opportunity to insert language into it about the need to end Korean War. And so we actually took a lot of the language from the House Resolution 152, calling for an end to the Korean War and for a peace agreement. And we gathered a coalition of peace and disarmament organizations and submitted it to the Rules Committee that was going to decide on which amendments would be included. And so it was a really kind of inside-outside strategy. The grassroots mobilized to call their members of Congress, and we knew, because of the insight and the expertise of our friends in Washington, D.C., how to advance this. And I mean, it was great because I was in Colorado at the time. I had given a talk, and we had just formed the Korea Peace Now regional group in Colorado. And it turned out that Ed Perlmutter, who is one of the congressmen from Denver, was on the Rules Committee. And I happened to visit him, the congressman, that day that the Rules Committee was going to decide which ones would make it. And I brought a group of Korean Americans, and together with Americans and Korean Americans, we really made the case that we need to end the Korean War. So he was really inspired by Women Cross DMZ. We gave him a scarf that we wore when we crossed the DMZ. And it's just, I don't know, in many ways, like the universe is helping us see through an end to the Korean War. Yeah.
It sounds like a miracle.
I know it is. No, but it's not a miracle. It's incredibly smart organizing. And it's also such a fabulous thing to be doing it with women and men. But really, I mean, the ways in which our team is working together is it's really great. And it's not just that it's women. I think it's a feminist approach. And I think that the world is really calling and needing a feminist approach. That is not a hierarchical, it's not about oppression, it's about liberation. And it's been really, as somebody who wants to be building movements, I see that we have a recipe for success.
Yeah, sounds great. And then what's your future plan for Women Cross DMZ?
Well, in September, we're going to Gyeonggi Province. There's going to be a DMZ Peace Forum. So Gloria Steinem, who is 85, will be one of the keynote speakers at the DMZ Peace Forum. And we're having a workshop on women in peace building there. But I think it's a big event for South Korea. It's around the anniversary of the Pyongyang summit. We've invited North Korean women to meet us to discuss our next steps. And so we're still awaiting a response from them. But we're going to continue doing what we do. We're trying to get to 100 for House Resolution 152 by the end of this year. We're going to keep pushing for the political space to support peace with North Korea. We're trying to bring a second meeting of women from Northeast Asia, from North Korea, South Korea, China, Japan, Russia, the United States together. And we have gotten support from Canada because they have a feminist foreign policy to support a second meeting. And it looks like now Sweden and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said that they will support this meeting. So we're planning to do that later this year. And we are coming out, we commissioned an independent panel of experts to produce a report on the impact of sanctions on North Korean women. So we will release that report at the end of October, because I think we really need to challenge the debate. We often think, and the way that it is framed, is that sanctions is a non-violent approach than going to war. But in fact, sanctions is war by other means. It's impacting the ordinary people. These are not smart sanctions. These are not sanctions that target the regime. It's not sanctions that are targeting the arms trade or its luxury goods. These are harming ordinary people. It's harming the humanitarian operations that are needed for North Koreans to lead a life of dignity and to survive. And so we need to challenge it. And so we've commissioned a really remarkable panel of experts, from Dr. Ki Park, who is a Harvard medical faculty member who performs brain surgery in North Korea with other Korean Americans. So you should all stay tuned. It's going to be a really important report. And then lastly, you know, we want to try to do another crossing next year. It's the 5th anniversary. It's the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War. And we know that when women are involved in peace processes, it actually leads to a peace agreement. That's what studies after study shows us. And so that's, we want to keep that point visible and to demand women's inclusion in the peace process.
Thank you for your time and interview today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and giving us an opportunity to you know, be fully transparent about Women Cross DMZ, because there's so much misconception about us. But I think that the women and the men that are a part of Women Cross DMZ are really some of the best and the brightest and the most dedicated to seeing an end to the Korean War.
Thank you. 오늘 크리스틴 사무총장님을 모시고 워먼 크로스 DMZ의 활동을 들어보았습니다. 한반도에 평화가 찾아올 때 그날까지 이 단체를 응원하면서 지켜보도록 하겠습니다. 많은 분들도 함께 동참해 주시길 바랍니다. 제가 준비한 소식은 여기까지고요. 다음에 또 따뜻한 소식을 갖고 찾아뵙겠습니다. 시청해 주신 JNCTV 시청자 여러분, 감사합니다.
더 나은 세상을 위해 공정한 언론의 역할을 다하고자 노력하는 JNCTV는 전 제작진의 자발적인 참여로 만들어지는 독립 언론이자 대한 매체입니다. 방송이 마음에 드셨다면 응원의 표시로 지금 좋아요, 구독 버튼을 눌러주세요. 감사합니다.